Hey kids, Mr. Joseph here, and I'm going to go over the definitions, the actual definitions of the words that are in the data analysis section of Lab 1. So you should have already come up with the working definitions. Working definition is something that's based on the procedures and information found in this lab. So you should have these spots all filled out, and then there's some on the next page as well. Right here, physical and chemical change. All right, and so I'm going to go over what the actual definitions are and show you how you could have used some context clues to figure out some of this stuff. So the first one is solute, and solute was, I was asked to define solute when you were on procedure number 2. Okay, so it says pour enough of the sodium tetraborate decahydrate as the solute into the solvent, the water, to create a saturated solution. So if we're pouring the sodium tetraborate decahydrate into the water as the solute, then we kind of know that that's the thing that's dissolving, right? As you stir it, it starts to disappear a little bit. And so that is what the solute, the part of solution that dissolves. Okay, of course you have to know what a solution is too. So a solution, you know, is, you could kind of, from the context clues again, is when you have something dissolved into something else. Okay, now the solvent, in procedure number 2, it said into the solvent, the water. So the water is the solvent. And what is this? What is the water doing? Well, the water is causing the solute, the sodium tetraborate decahydrate, to dissolve. So the part of the solution that causes the dissolving of the solute, right? Water doesn't always have to be the solvent. You could have alcohol or like mineral spirits or something like that to do the dissolving of a solute. Okay, now a saturated solution. So we know a solution is, because I talked about it, when you've dissolved something into something else. Okay, so a saturated solution occurs when no more solute can be dissolved. And how can you recognize that no more solute can be dissolved into the solvent? Well, you can know that because as you stir the solution and try to get more solute dissolved, if no more dissolves and there's still some sitting at the bottom, then obviously it is saturated. There's no more that can be put into that solution. Okay, so a saturated solution is when no more solute can be dissolved into the solvent. Okay, this can be recognized. So a long time is kind of subjective, but you know, if you keep stirring and no more gets into it and there's still some at the bottom, then you've got a saturated solution. So this word polymer, we got to look at some context clues again. And if you were reading the procedure carefully or the information at the top of here carefully, it says especially take note of the information on the last 2 pages of this lab. And so let's go look at the last 2 pages. It's actually not the last 2 pages because I put a link to the quiz on the last page. So it's the second to last 2 pages. And we see this picture of polyvinyl acetate and sodium tetraborate decahydrate. All right, now if we look at this polyvinyl acetate, we can see in the word itself, it has the word poly, which was like our polymer. Okay, so we can kind of infer that maybe this polyvinyl acetate is a polymer, and it actually is a polymer. What does the word poly mean? Well, poly means more than one, or a bunch of something, like Polynesia is a bunch of islands. And if we look at this polyvinyl acetate molecule, we can see that we've got these groups of these O's, these oxygen And we'll talk about more what's in these molecules in the future. But you can see these different groups that are repeating, okay? Now these little groups, if you have repeating groups, we call that a monomer. And in fact, you've been exposed to polymers before. So in biology, starch, remember doing the experiment with the diffusion through a membrane and the starch can't get through the membrane? That's because starch is a polymer, and it's a polymer of another molecule, which is glucose. Glucose all stuck together makes starch. And so the glucose would be the monomer, and then the starch is the polymer. Okay, so a polymer, we're going to define that here. It is many monomers, and we're not going to say stuck together. We're going to use a term in chemistry, chemically bonded together in a long chain. That's a polymer, okay? And there are lots of polymers in nature and around us. Okay, now a physical change. What is a physical change? Well, a physical change might be a change in appearance or a state of matter, but it does not change what the materials are made of. Okay, so a physical change in which material composition does not change. An example would be a melting ice cube. So the ice cube is changing from solid to a liquid, but both of them, the ice cube and the sample of liquid, is made of water molecules. Okay? Another example is anything that dissolves. So if you have sugar dissolving in water, we call that sugar water because there's still sugar there and there's still water there, and the materials have not changed at all. Same with salt dissolving water. Salt water, we still call it salt water because it's salt and water. There's just in a different physical state. Okay? Now, a chemical change, on the other hand, is a change in which a substance changes into another substance. A change Now, what does that mean? We're going to explore a little bit in the future what that means, what a substance is, and how do we classify matter. And that will help us understand this chemical change a little bit more. At the molecular level, though, at the atomic level, molecular level, very, very, very tiny, what's happening is a chemical bond is either broken or formed, or both. So, chemical bonds are broken and or formed. Okay, so if you have a chemical bond occurring, then the substance changes, and it has a new name. It will be called something else. So when I take oxygen, for example, when I take oxygen atoms and I take hydrogen atoms, and I stick two hydrogen atoms to an oxygen atom, that becomes water. We no longer call it hydrogen and oxygen. It's a new substance. So if we go to page 5, we can see that we've got this substance. We've got two of these polyvinyl acetate molecules and the sodium tetraborate decahydrate molecule. And what's going to happen is a chemical bond is going to form between these three. Okay, the bond is occurring, and therefore that's a chemical reaction. And this happens millions and millions and millions of times, and we get the new substance. And I actually don't know what this cross-chain polymer substance is. There must be a name for it. You could Google that or try to figure that out on your own. But because the bonds have been formed, we now have a new substance, and that is a chemical change. So that's all our definitions. I hope you have a great day, and that's all I got for you.